you are doing well. It is Monday, not just any Monday, it is the Monday of Passion Week or Easter week. And if you're anything like me, the previous weeks have been all about the Easter candy. I'm a big fan of the Sweet Tart jelly beans. I know Starburst jelly beans get a lot of the love, but Sweet Tart jelly beans might be the most underrated candy of Easter, and maybe candy in general. I'll go that far and say it. But obviously, that is not why we celebrate Easter. Easter is all about the gospel, right? The death, the burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The crux of our salvation is this is that time to think specifically and seriously about those events. But there's a lot that goes on leading up to the crucifixion of Jesus. There's a whole week of events really, and there's just a lot that goes on, a lot of characters, a lot of people at play, and in the Easter week is a story of humanity. You know, we talk about Jesus being fully God and fully man. It's a hard concept to understand, but in this week we see events of Jesus' full humanity at play. And it's a sobering thought. It's a humbling thought that the God of the universe would come in the form of man. And we get to see that play out through this week. So we're going to look specifically at some of the emotions of the Easter week. And specifically the disappointment that is experienced through this week. And even more so, we're going to look specifically at Jesus' disappointment, because there's a sense of disappointment that the crowds feel. There's a sense of disappointment that the disciples feel. But we point to Jesus because even Jesus in his human state feels a little bit of disappointment. So we want to look at Jesus, the disappointment that Jesus came into and how he responded to it, because disappointment is going to be with us. We've all experienced disappointment. You know, we just talked with a student who's feeling the disappointment of missing out on his senior season of baseball. And maybe you're experiencing that same thing, missing out on a sports season. Or maybe you're experiencing missing a specific event that you were looking forward to. So we all understand disappointment, and Jesus does too. So we jump to our passage of Luke 22. In verse 42, it says this, saying, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. And nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." And there appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and in his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. When he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said to them, Why are you sleeping? Rise and pray that you may not enter temptation." So Jesus, in this specific passage, we're kind of in the middle of the Easter week. He's already come into the city. They've already had the Last Supper, but he hasn't been arrested yet, and he hasn't been put on trial or anything like that. He hasn't been crucified. So he's kind of in the middle. He's in the garden, and he goes off and he prays, and he tells his disciples before he does that they need to be praying as well. And so Jesus goes off, and he cries out in one of the examples of pure humanity. He bows in prayer to his heavenly Father. And he says this, "If you are willing, remove this cup from me." Now, the disappointment that Jesus feels here isn't a disappointment in, "Oh man, I still have to do this. I want to get out of this. Let somebody else." And we'll see that in his response. But there's a sense of disappointment because he is human. And we can all relate to this, I think. There are times where our parents have us do something that we try to find another way to do. And it's like, I just don't want to do it that way or something like that. And so we're kind of disappointed when we have to do it the way we're told. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. And Jesus' response will clear this up for us. He's not trying to get out of it, but he's like, physically, he knows what's going to come. He knows the pain. He knows how hard this is going to be. And the result is he's stressed. He's sweating drops of blood. So knowing that this is the way to do it, there's a little bit of disappointment. In a purely human standpoint, there's disappointment here that, there isn't another way. This isn't what I choose, right? There's a sense of disappointment in that regards. And we'll come back to his response, which kind of shapes that a little bit better for us. But moving on, we see that he goes, after he's done praying, after he responds in that situation, he goes out and he finds his disciples sleeping. And now there's a disappointment here. He's been let down by those closest to him. And again, this is something we can all relate to, right? We are in a broken world and people are going to let us down. So we can, again, relate to what Jesus is dealing with here, right? These are his only friends right now. Judas is about to betray him. He knows all the crowds are going to turn on him. He is at a very vulnerable place. He needs his friends, and they have let him down. He is disappointed in this way. And he tells them, why are you sleeping? You need to be praying. So Jesus feels it this way. And in another passage, we actually see this is the third time that Jesus has come to check on his disciples. It's like the ultimate 3 strikes you're out. So he came once and went back to pray. Came a second time, went back to pray. And the third time, he finally wakes them up and confronts them. Like, why are you sleeping? So Jesus, in this passage, is experiencing some disappointment. But let's look at his response, because this is what matters. This is what puts it all into perspective. This is what helps us understand that Jesus wasn't trying to get out of dying on the cross, right? So his response, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. When his request was, if there's any other way, there wasn't even a thought in his mind that this was going to happen. He knew. Nevertheless, this was a prayer, let your will be done. Jesus responded humbly in the face of disappointment. It was a humble response that it wasn't up to him. It wasn't his human nature that would dictate, his humanity that would dictate what he was going to do. But it would be God's will, would be carried through. So he responds humbly to disappointment. And the next thing we see is that Jesus responds responsibly to disappointment. Another passage in Mark tells us that he told his disciples, get up, the time for me to be arrested is now. All right, Jesus was ready to go. He didn't shy away in his disappointment, in his hurt. Right? He didn't allow that from keeping him from what he needed to do. He acted, and he acted responsibly. And that is Jesus' example for us. When we are faced with disappointment, because we will face disappointment, we're facing it now, and we'll face it in the future. When disappointment comes along, how do we respond? Following Jesus' example, we respond humbly. We respond humbly to the circumstances. We respond humbly to the task at hand. And we respond responsibly. Just because we are disappointed, that doesn't give us an excuse to stop doing what should be done. All the more we do it in spite of our disappointment. You keep acting, you keep going responsibly. And that is the challenge for us. When we face disappointment, respond correctly. We hope